Well, for the second time in 2 weeks, the UFC puts on a tremendous main event, which ends in a bit of controversy and via very close split decision. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani in Boston alongside the man in the hat. It is early Monday morning. We just took in, finally, Dominick Cruz versus Tj Dillashaw. And as you probably know by now, Dominick Cruz is now the undisputed UFC bantamweight champion. He wins, as I said, via razor-thin decision. Two judges scored in favor of him. One scored it in favor of the now former champion, Tj Dillashaw. Wow. Where to begin? Well, let's start here. Who'd you score it for?
I still had it for Cruz, 3-2. But the problem was the fight. Like we all watched it, and the scorecards were all over the place. If you asked me to break down like who won which rounds, I'm not sure I could do that 100%. But I did think I was sort of leaning Cruz the first 3 rounds. Yep. I know that much, and then it got a little bit more sketchy. I thought maybe Dillashaw pulled out the last couple. So you could squint and look the other way on those earlier rounds, but I found it hard to score against Cruz, who was avoiding taking those punches and still getting his counter, doing his game plan so well, but basically being as elusive as he was, not taking those big shots in those first 3 rounds especially, and it's just difficult for me to give it the other way. Sure. So that's the way I kept kind of thinking of it as I scored him. But obviously, like watching it one time from cage side is not the best. It's not the best view you can get for the whole fight, but that's just the way it looked to me. Very close fight. If they had said that Dillashaw had won it 3-2, I would have been fine with that as well.
Yeah, and I'm happy you say that because I see a lot of fans screaming robbery and one of the worst decisions. Yeah. That's not the case. I mean, this was very close. It could have gone either way, and I agree with you for the record. 3 rounds to 2 for Dominick Cruz. I had it winning the first, second, and third rounds, and then I had TJ coming on strong in the 4th and 5th. But every round was really a toss-up. And what I hate about this, this controversy and yelling and the age that we live in, it takes away from what was an amazing fight. Again, much like Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit, a fight that, in my opinion, exceeded my expectations. I could not look away. It was a lot of fun to watch this fight, and that's the story, in my opinion.
It really was. This is one of those ones that I think you could have circled a ways back and said, this technical, their styles, just what was going to be happening, the mirroring styles, this whole narrative that goes in. You might have actually placed the expectation to be fairly high. And for it to meet that, but not only meet it, but just exceed it, what more can you ask for in a main event? I thoroughly enjoyed it. Even that whole first round as it played out, I saw a lot of people just kind of like nudging everybody and saying like, what a crazy fight. And you're expecting at that point, at least I was, a full 5-round fight. It just seemed like neither guy was going to get touched up to get in big time trouble. You're going to see a lot of movement, and it was crazy. It was fun. It was just it's fun to watch it. It was crazy to think, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, Dominick Cruz having that sort of movement, just given his circumstances, 3 ACLs and everything else he's gone through, and just to still have that kind of movement. And we know how fast Tj Dillashaw is, how explosive he can be from those brows, the brow series. And he just, he could not size him up. Every time he'd sort of go in there, I mean, he rarely was getting him. I think there was something like he was in the 20% range for his strike. So pretty crazy to see Dominick Cruz not only get his belt back, but to show up in that form, to me, that was a pretty inspiring thing to see.
This is no hyperbole. Dominick Cruz might possess the most impressive mind that I've ever come across, because he will argue with you until he is blue that cage rust doesn't exist. And I didn't believe him. When I was talking to him back in Houston, the last time we worked together, he was like, cage rust doesn't exist. It doesn't stop talking. He even mentioned that to Joe Rogan after the fight. And then you see him come out after 3 ACL surgeries and 1 fight, essentially 1 minute of action in 4 years, and look that way and move that way. The man might be right, or maybe he just plays by his own rules. But just the performance that he put on, given those circumstances, to me, one of the most inspiring ones in the history of the sport.
It's almost like he operates out of some spite and some stubbornness or something, because a lot of times I think he just wants to prove some people wrong. Sure. I notice it when a lot of things, so somebody, when he hears enough things coming at him that he believes to be wrong, he does his damnedest to sort of prove you to be the one who's wrong. And he's sort of doing that tonight at this press conference as well, just pointing out the cage rust thing not being, just not really being a thing with Dana, sort of agreeing with him like, wow, I've never seen anybody kind of prove that theory the other way like he did. But just in other things too, even with the Kenny Florian thing, I mean, just everything. Like he's a grudge type of guy, and I think he really holds certain things in the back of his mind, and he gets a little salty. When he wins, he wants to like say, "I told you so," and good for him. I mean, whatever motivation he comes up with, it certainly works for him, and he's you watch him in that sort of situation like tonight, and doing that against Dillashaw, whom everybody holds up here as well, and it's just. It's pretty awe-inspiring because you sort of forget how good he was before he kind of went through this 4-year hiatus, and even in that 1-minute fight against Mizukaki, you only got a brief glimpse of him. It was very explosive. It was this great thing, but then he goes down again. You just forget how good his movement is, and to see that again, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, he said afterwards that he has been dealing with plantar fasciitis, limping. It really started to hurt him tremendously in the 5th round, so you hope that that's not going to be too big of an issue, but I have a feeling that Dominick Cruz, of all people, can come back from that. It's interesting. Tj Dillashaw walked into this fight never have been taken down in his entire UFC career. Dominick Cruz did it several times. Now, I was talking to one of Tj Dillashaw's managers earlier, and he was like, well, look, he's taking him down, but he's not doing anything on the ground. And Dominick said afterwards that he felt like that was a big reason why he won the fight. Should that have been the reason why he won this fight?
Well, I mean, it all plays into it in this sort of fight. I mean, I agree he didn't do much with it, but it still happened. He was still able to execute that. So it should score on some level. I don't know if it should have swayed him enough to win the fight, but I thought that combined with the other things he was doing sort of gave him the fight. I just thought that, his elusivity, he was just getting out of the way enough. I mean, it started to seem like TJ was stalking him and getting frustrated at times, even though he was starting to nick him up later with some bigger shots. But I just, it's hard to score against a guy who makes himself that elusive, I know that's not really part of the scoring criteria, but he was still using his counters and his unorthodox movement to do his offense based off of his defense. And to me, that was vintage Dominick Cruz. I just thought that he looked like maybe even better, but he just looked like Dominick Cruz to me. So that's the way I saw it.
All right, so let's look ahead now. If you're the UFC, do you book Dominick Cruz versus Uriah Faber 3? It seems like he wants the next title shot, and that's a very sellable fight. Or do you go rematch route? What do you do?
See, we talked about this, the narrative and the backstory with Faber and everything that's going on with that. Like Faber is in a win-win situation. No matter who wins, you've got a good thing. But this is the win situation. Other than a draw, this was the one situation that you're like, ooh, I don't know, because the belt switched hands again, and therefore you have to sort of look from Tj Dillashaw's standpoint that he put on a good fight. Was a controversy? We don't think it was that controversial, but it was such a close fight and such a good fight that you might consider doing it again. Just based on that, alone, just knowing what they do, and then there's an aspect of, yes, Faber has had a lot of title shots, and so to just basically say like, oh well, he never gets a shot or something is not accurate either. Sure. So I think that in the end, I'd still probably rather see Faber get the shot next, just based on the movement of the division a little bit and keep things flowing. But I would not be against seeing that rematch. I mean, that's a good fight, and it's just it'll stay with you a long time. You'll be thinking about this fight for a long time. So if they wanted to play back that one again, I'd be down with that as well.
I lean towards Faber, Cruz 3, Rafael Sunsao versus Tj Dillashaw. Sunsao has a win over Dillashaw, split decision win. Next month we have Cody Garbrandt versus John Lineker, and don't forget about Aljamain Sterling, who is here in attendance, who is still a free agent, but still, in my opinion, a player in the UFC's bantamweight division. Okay, let's move along to the co-main event. Eddie Alvarez picks up a very important win over Anthony Pettis. Another close one. Yes. Do you think he deserved to win that fight?
This one was harder for me, I thought. Ultimately, given the control that Alvarez sort of had, and this is always one of those things, I mean, it's really controversial when one guy's landing the bigger shots throughout the fight, but the other guy's sort of controlling the action. It always ends up like which part of that criteria do you give more leeway to? But ultimately, I had no problem with Alvarez winning. I would probably have given it to him if I had to do it, 2 rounds to 1. So to me, it was like they got it right. But I saw a lot of people talking about Pettis maybe should have won that fight. And it's hard to argue that he couldn't, or he shouldn't have, because he did have some big moments in that fight, and he landed the bigger shots throughout. I just thought that Eddie did a better job of sort of executing a game plan that was clearly designed to take him out of his comfort zone, to take away the striking edge and all that stuff, and he executed it. And sometimes that's what you got to do, I guess. A guy, I think I was a little surprised because I thought he would accommodate Pettis in a sort of in a fight that was going to be sort of back and forth. We've seen Alvarez do that in the past, Michael Chandler and everybody. So I thought maybe we were going to see one of those types of fights, if nothing else. But you got to hand it to him. He went back to Philadelphia for this one. He comes out and he executes this game plan. Good for him. He did good enough, I guess, in the judges' eyes to get this, and it was hard for me to find fault in that.
Yeah, I gave it 2-1 to Eddie Alvarez. I had him winning the first and third rounds, and I thought that, look, this is not a highlight reel type of performance. It wasn't sexy. It's not one that when we write the book on Eddie Alvarez, it will be, all over the place. I mean, it just wasn't that fight, but it was the perfect game plan. He executed the perfect game plan. The blueprint has been put out now on how to beat Anthony Pettis, and Eddie Alvarez did what he had to do to win the fight. Now, does he get a title shot off of this? Remember, the title was being defended on March 5th, Rafael dos Anjos versus Conor McGregor. Does he wait until the winner? And does the UFC want him fighting for the belt after that? I was told Khabib Nurmagomedov texted Dana White and said, give me Eddie Alvarez in June. I don't hate that idea. What do you think of it?
That's not a bad one. I hadn't really contemplated that one, but that would be a lot of fun. Just getting Khabib back in there against anybody would be cool, but I wanted to see him obviously against Ferguson. That was, to me, that was like this big deal at the time. That didn't happen. So, I mean, to me, that would be a great consolation. I heard other people saying that they wouldn't mind seeing Ferguson against Alvarez, and that you can't really go wrong with any of those matchups, to be honest. But I don't think Eddie did enough here tonight to warrant a title shot. I mean, to wait it out and to see what happened. I just don't even think the UFC would consider him at this point. I think they'd probably consider some of the other guys before him. So, in my mind, he should still, he should fight somebody else. But if he takes on Nurmagomedov, that's a tough one. That's a tough route to take.
Another guy who's been out for quite some time. It's a bitter pill to swallow for Anthony Pettis. I don't think his stock falls too much. Still very much a player, still a top 5 lightweight in my opinion. But now the division is moving along with Khabib coming back and Ferguson doing what he's doing, and now Conor in the mix. He's now further away from that title shot. And I think back to where we were a year ago today, coming off that win over Gilbert Melendez. I thought that this is a guy, I picked him to be my fighter of the year for 2015, and now here he is so far away from that title shot. Tough for Anthony Pettis. Okay, let's talk about Matt Mitrione versus Travis Browne. Travis Browne in front of a chorus of boos. This Boston crowd was not a fan of Travis Browne. Defeats Matt Mitrione, but it's not without controversy. He poked him in the eye twice. Doesn't matter if it was intentional or not. Them's the facts. He poked him in the eye twice, and then after, when he won via third-round TKO, Matt Mitrione's eye, I've never seen an eye like this before after any kind of combat sports fight. It was just, I mean, it looked like a balloon was coming out of it. Yes. And it was very unfortunate, especially considering the fact that Matt Mitrione goes into this fight, and his final fight is UFC contract. He's 37 years old. Yeah. Who knows what the future holds for him? Do you think a point should have been taken away after the second eye poke?
I do. I mean, to me, after the first one, it was pretty clear that he was affected by that. And at that point, I'm not sure. You're sitting ringside. I'm not sure if how much he was cautioned not to keep his hands open. But usually, you'll hear in that situation a referee kind of go detail that sort of thing, so that if it happens again, it's just sort of understood. Like, hey, you did it again. I have to take a point from you. I just didn't feel like it was handled all that well, and especially in the second one. It almost looked to me, and I was watching the referee, it almost seemed like he didn't really know what to do, to be honest. And I haven't seen him a lot. I don't want to,
Gary Foreman is his name.
But so I don't know, what his experience in this is, but it didn't seem like he truly knew what he should be doing. And, I mean, there should have been a point taken because that clearly affected him. And I know we were talking to some people about this before, but, there's no shame in sort of saying I can't continue either. I know Mitrione is, there's this like unspoken rule with these fighters who are just like, I'm okay, I can see, and just kind of let's keep going and stuff like that. But, I mean, his eye at the end, I know that the puffiness really came later in the third round, but, I mean, he was clearly affected. There was times you were watching him in exchange, and he's just squinting. Like, you could just see him trying to even open his eye at all, and I can't imagine he was seeing very well out of it, if at all. So, yeah, there should have been a point taken away.
I don't get the feeling that Travis did it on purpose, but still, that's a moot point. I mean, you did it twice, so I think something should have been done, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Mitrione now.
If it's a foul, it's a foul, and it's like if you do it twice and it affects an outcome, then it should be a point taken away. It's just simple as that.
Once again, in MMA, it almost pays to cheat sometimes, to bend the rules.
That cliche, I saw a lot of people rolling that out, and I used to always laugh at it and be like, there's some truth to that. But then you see this tonight, and you're like, there's real truth to that. And you see John Jones making a tweet saying,
Yes.
did you see this tweet? He
Yes,
basically
yes.
is saying like, hey, that's one of my favorite moves, or
techniques.
techniques, and that sort of thing. But in some ways, you're almost like, well, why not just go kick him in the groin right away and poke him in the eye? Because if you can get by with it and they're not going to do anything about it, well, why not? But I hope that they can figure that out at some point, because this was a clear example of one of those situations where they could have easily taken him. Everybody would have understood. I think people are afraid to take that point because that could be controversial too, but not in this case.
Yeah, for GFC, it's a much-needed win after a forgettable 2015 campaign. And, for Travis Brown, clearly not a fan favorite anymore. Things change, and, fans will have the reasons why they booed him. I'm very curious, though. In my opinion, the big story is what happens to Matt Mitrione. Does he test the waters? Does the UFC have him back? This is a guy who's attractive, in my opinion, to a Bellator, considering his history with Spike TV and The Ultimate Fighter and his football.
How many fights did Koscheck lose? And he signed us. He's the one who said, hey, let's open the gates to free agency. It's pretty funny.
We could use a few heavyweights over there. Okay, it's very late here, so we have to say goodnight, but let's talk about one more performance. Is there any other performance, whether it's Francisco Trinaldo, it's Patrick Cote, anyone else that comes to mind, some of the guys like Rob Font, some of the guys who fought earlier in the night, anyone comes to mind that you want to spotlight?
I would point out maybe Herman. Ed Herman had he's coming up in weight, and I didn't think this was a particularly great matchup for him. And I sort of thought, you start to think maybe he doesn't have everything he did back in the day, short fuse, the way he fought and everything. And this is a pretty impressive performance for him. I thought he was picking his shots really well. It seemed like I don't think he won the first round, but it seemed like he was sort of sizing him up in the end, and that was a pretty impressive win.
Yeah, I was impressed with Chris Wade, a New Yorker who had a big win, now quietly 4-0, but perhaps most impressed by what has become somewhat commonplace here in the Boston Garden, a Canadian walking into this building and picking up a big win. How about Patrick Cote at 170? I think they've heard enough singing for 1 week. They know what's up. The Canadians, once again, reign supreme here in the Garden. I like that very much. Now, congratulations to your Broncos. Well done. We did it. It was fun covering this with you.
That's fun being here in Boston because they're scared. They don't want to go to Denver. They don't want to.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Yeah. Patriots. Wow. That's big. Also, important to note, no MMA hour on Monday. We are off due to traveling home and whatnot. That's the one, in my opinion, drawback from these Sunday shows. But we are back Tuesday, same time and place. Got a great show for you, so mark that on your calendars, if you will. All right, we are done from here in Boston. Thank you so much for watching our coverage all weekend long. Appreciate your time. We'll see you on Tuesday for the MMA Hour.